The night my neighbor set fire to my grandfather's old barn, she thought she was getting rid of an eyesore, something that embarrassed her little kingdom of copy-paste houses. What she really did was hand me the matchbook that burned her whole empire down. My name's Daniel Harper. I spent almost 3 decades as a federal judge, and I thought I'd left the courtroom wars behind. Turns out corruption doesn't care about retirement. Sometimes it follows you home, wearing high heels and a designer suit. That barn wasn't just wood and nails to me. My grandfather, Patrick Harper, built it with his own hands in the early 50s when he came back from the war. Every oak beam cut from the land, every joint carved so tight you couldn't slip a dime between them. The place smelled like sweet corn and pipe smoke, even 70 years later. When my wife passed from cancer, I moved back to that land to find some peace, to hear the silence of open fields and nothing else. What I didn't know was that my farm sat right in the middle of Meadow Ridge Estates, a sea of nearly 900 identical homes run by a homeowners association president who thought she was Queen of Iowa. Her name was Valerie Crane. 5'6" of sharp elbows and sharper heels, always clicking across pavement like a metronome, counting down to someone's misery. She sold houses for a living. Her husband built them, and together they owned every permit, every inspection, every approval in the county. Picture a monarchy run from a strip mall office with inspirational posters on the walls. That was Valerie, and she couldn't stand the sight of my barn sitting proud in the middle of her suburban kingdom, because it reminded her subjects that life used to be built, not manufactured. The first time she marched up my gravel drive, I was elbow deep in the carburetor of my grandfather's old John Deere. Diesel on my hands, autumn in the air. She stood there in her cream suit, staring at the red barn like it had insulted her ancestors. "Mr. Harper," she said, voice sweet as honey poured over barbed wire. "That structure is hurting property values. It's visible from 17 homes. We need it gone." I wiped my hands and told her plain, "Ma'am, that barn was here before your subdivision was even a sketch on paper. You've got no jurisdiction on this land." Her smile tightened into something colder than January. "There are creative ways to solve problems that affect our community," she whispered. And that was the moment my prosecutor instincts woke up. 1 week later, the county code inspector pulled into my drive with a stack of anonymous complaints so thick he could have used it as armor. Noise violations, rodents, environmental hazards, you name it. The poor guy was sweating bullets, muttering about his daughter's college tuition and how certain people had reminded him of his career prospects. When I made him show me his phone, there it was, a voicemail from Valerie herself, not even bothering to hide it. She'd weaponized the county government against me like it was her personal attack dog. Now, I could have just yelled at her, maybe put up a fence and tried to ignore it. But 27 years on the bench teaches you something. Bullies keep pushing until they meet a wall harder than themselves. So I started documenting every call, every fake violation, every threat. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, a process server showed up with a lawsuit claiming my barn was structurally dangerous and a terrorist hideout. I damn near spit my coffee across the kitchen table laughing. That's when I called Michael Tran, one of my old clerks who'd turned into a civil rights lawyer feared by city councils across Chicago. Within 72 hours, he had filed a motion to dismiss and a federal countersuit that would make Valerie's lawyers choke on their $800 an hour invoices. But the deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Every acre of farmland around Meadow Ridge had been quietly bought up by shell companies. Companies tied straight back to Valerie and her husband. They weren't just harassing me because they hated barns. They were trying to build a development empire, and my 45 acres were the one stubborn holdout in the middle. My land was the keystone of their fortune. And I wasn't alone. One neighbor, Marcus, a young father pushing a stroller, pulled me aside in the subdivision one day and whispered, "Judge, she fined us $80 for leaving a basketball hoop out past sunset. She threatened my wife about our immigration status. We're exhausted." Another widow showed me a shoebox full of violation notices for things like hanging laundry outside. A veteran down the street had been cited every time he parked his motorcycle in his own driveway. The pattern was clear. Valerie targeted the people she thought were too scared or too poor to fight back. I kept building my file thicker, and then the worst night came. At 3 in the morning, I woke to smoke pouring through my bedroom window. I stumbled outside in my pajamas and saw my grandfather's barn, 70 years of family history, lit up like a funeral pyre. I can't explain the cold fury that hit me in that moment, but I'll tell you this. It wasn't grief, it was focus. She had just crossed the line that no one comes back from. I called in every favor I had. The FBI got involved, led by an agent named Carla Mendez who had zero patience for suburban royalty playing mob boss. Turned out they'd been tracking similar land scams across half the Midwest, and Valerie Crane had just painted a big red target on herself by committing federal arson. From then on it was war, but a quiet one. My farmhouse became a surveillance hub. Neighbors slipped me copies of violation letters, recordings of threats, even photos of county inspectors measuring grass with rulers at Valerie's command. We found the smoking gun buried in the HOA's original paperwork, a clause giving them first rights to buy non-conforming land at 60 cents on the dollar. That barn fire wasn't random. It was the final shove to make me sell cheap. The climax came at the monthly HOA meeting. Picture 400 angry residents stuffed into a community center built for 200, the air buzzing with suspicion. Valerie strutted in wearing her navy Armani, smile polished to perfection, ready to give her speech about maintaining standards. I stood up in the back and said, "Mrs. Crane, I think it's time the community heard the truth." She sneered, "Mr. Harper, you'll have your turn at the end." That's when Agent Mendez rose, badge flashing. "Actually, he'll speak now. This meeting is a federal evidence session." The room exploded. Phones out, reporters rushing forward, people whispering. Valerie's face went pale. I walked up to the podium carrying a folder so thick it could stop a bullet and my grandfather's charred hammer sealed in a plastic bag. I laid it down with a thud that silenced the crowd. I projected documents onto the screen, bank transfers, shell companies, kickbacks. I played recordings of her promising to make my problems disappear if I sold her my land. Her own voice echoed through the hall, dripping with arrogance. When I finished, Agent Mendez stepped forward, cuffs in hand. "Valerie Crane, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, arson, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations." The room erupted in cheers. Neighbors who'd been terrified for years were hugging, crying, clapping. Marcus stood up with tears streaming and said, "Judge, you gave us our community back." Valerie tried to bolt, but the FBI had every exit covered. Watching her get let out in handcuffs was the sweetest justice I've ever tasted. Months later, she pled guilty to racketeering and is serving 12 years. Her husband's company lost every county contract. The commissioner who backed her went down too. And on the ashes of that barn, we built a new one. This time with the whole community pitching in. Veterans donated lumber, Amish craftsmen raised the frame, kids painted signs. We turned it into a legal clinic for families fighting HOA abuse across 6 counties. Sometimes I walk out there at sunset, lean on the fresh-cut oak beams, and hear the sound of hammers and laughter echoing like it did when my grandfather built the first one. And I think, peace doesn't come from hiding from conflict. It comes from standing your ground when someone tries to take it away. Now here's the part where I hand it to you. If your HOA president torched your family's history just to raise her property values, would you fight back the way I did, or would you sell and run? Do you think HOAs protect communities, or have they become playgrounds for petty tyrants? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share your own stories, and let's see just how many Valeries are out there. Because trust me, some battles are worth fighting, no matter how long they take.